Hola, first gen. It's your intuitive prima Priscila. I hope that you are having a good day so far. And I want to welcome you to the first of many Corazon a Corazones that we're going to be having together, heart to hearts. So, the intent of these types of episodes are going to be solo episodes. It's just going to be you and I. And I'm going to bring to the table either a story, a lesson, maybe a review of previous episodes, just different things that are popping up in my experience or in the work that I do with first gens, and that hopefully will serve you and your journey in one way or another. And then, secondly, or another piece of this is my goal is to record these and not edit them down. So, como salgan, whatever mistakes I make, I'm going to post it because part of what I've been working through is perfectionism. So, perfectionism tends to be something that I have seen sticks around with a lot of first gens that I work with, I come across, and it's something that has been popping up in my experience. And I thought I had worked through it, but of course, it's peeking its little head through again. So, my goal is to record these episodes and not edit or cut any of it out to one for myself, right? To like prove to myself that that is okay, that I can do it. But two, to hopefully encourage you guys to move forward, even if it's imperfect, even through imperfect action or messy action, as you may have heard, because I definitely recognize that I would have still been stuck in overthinking what my next step out of corporate would have been if I wasn't willing to take imperfect action, to take action when I didn't feel fully ready. And so I see the gift in that. And I know that, but I was allowing it to stop me for a little bit. And I don't want that. I don't want that because I have found so much joy and fulfillment in this path that I'm on, and I want to continue it and not let it stop me. Okay, so hopefully it also encourages you to take whatever imperfect action your intuition or your path has been showing is next for you. You got this. Do it. Si se puede. Échale ganas. Okay. One other little announcement. So the platform Spotify has this new feature, which I'm so excited about. Now it lets you guys like post comments on my episodes or on podcast episodes. So I would love to hear from you guys if you're on Spotify or YouTube. I don't think Apple Podcasts has this feature yet, but it would be nice if they create it. If you are tuning into somewhere where you can comment, I would love to hear from you. And if you could tell me, what is your favorite part about the podcast as a whole? If you've heard it, if you've heard one episode, 5 episodes, however many episodes you've heard, what is your favorite part about the podcast? And then two, how long have you been tuning in for? I would love to know. Porque in the past, I could only ask you guys questions, but I couldn't comment back. But now it's allowing, kind of like YouTube comments. Now we're able to read them and comment back and post them. So please, please, please let me know. Déjame saber, por favor. All right. So the title of this episode is a little bit strong, and this episode is going to be a little bit deep. This episode is going to be about kind of a hard. Let me get in that mood actually, because I'm so happy to be talking to you guys, and now I want to kind of shift focus into what I want to share with you guys, which is a story, and I want to tie it to the theme or the topic that we dove into in the last episode. So, in the last podcast episode, we talked about guilt, first gen guilt, and we explored that with La Doctora Lizette. She is a Latina psychologist who focuses on the first gen community and I think first gen BIPOC community. But one of the themes that she explores with her clients is first gen guilt. And so that has been kind of the theme that I have been also incorporating in the other aspects of my business for this month. So if you didn't know, for example, I have the Good Hijas, Hijos, Hijes, Gone Badish community, and we meet every other Thursday. And so guilt is going to be the topic that we talk about in our meeting this Thursday. Which, by the way, if you haven't joined, I recommend that you do if you're looking for community on your journey. Pero we're incorporating that in this week. Then we had that episode, and also I sent out a newsletter which also included the topic or the theme guilt. So I was like, let me make this first Corazon a Corazon centered around that a little bit, but also with a story to tell you guys. So essentially, if you guys don't know, 2020, so around actually exactly 3 years ago, wow, exactly 3 years ago, I was moving. I was moving out of my apartment that I had lived in for many, many years, and I was packing up my stuff in emergency mode because the month of June 3 years ago, my family and I received the news about my sister's diagnosis. So my sister was about to go into treatment for cancer, and um, you know, this isn't something that ran in the family or that any of us were expecting. And it happened very, very quickly. So 3 years ago, actually June of 3 years ago, so 2021, I got the call from my sister, and she let me know that they had detected that for like within her. And um, that's a whole other story, like how, like kind of what happened when I received the news and everything. But basically, I got into big sister mode, Leo mode, right? I'm a Leo, and I'm her big sister. And I feel like from that moment on, I was running on an adrenaline high that I've never experienced before, probably like fight or flight in a way that I hadn't experienced before. And so I decided that I did not want her to go through this process alone, and I decided to move out to Tennessee with her. And so, exactly 3 years ago, I was doing that. I was packing up my apartment. I had 3 weeks to do the whole thing, or I set myself that goal because um, she was going to start treatment, and it was like immediately she had to start it. And so, yeah, I was like, I need to get there as soon as possible. So, anywho, um, I packed my things and I drove across the country to be with my sister. And we got I rented a home out there, and she started treatment. And basically, I want to focus today's story a little bit about my process more than hers. So just like kind of my story, a piece of it, actually. I'm going to tell you very specific part of it. But I want to just preface, kind of like the background. So from July to December, or let's say from July to September, the summer months, I continued to work in my corporate job. I kind of was in this limbo of adrenaline and like figuring out, I don't know, it was just kind of new stuff happening very quickly, doing research, being in like survival mode. Honestly, it's kind of all like happening super fast and you can't really grasp it. And I feel like by November, the adrenaline began to settle down a little bit, just enough to start to feel or start to remember or think about what had just happened. So it was very crazy to me because now I know that that's actually normal, that sometimes like when events like that happen, it takes a couple of months of adrenaline running or like survival mode. And it's not until after, or until like 6 months, I think it was, after that you start to really come to terms with what you just went through and start to feel the feelings deeper, or you start to be more in the present in a way. And I think that that's what was happening to me. So around November, we were prepping for her first major surgery. Actually, not her first one, but one of her major surgeries. And I took a leave of absence from work. And so I had some space, I would say a couple of weeks, to plan for that and to prepare and to do the research and to all of the things. And in those moments, I started to feel what the weight of what was happening. Obviously, I had felt it throughout. It's not like I hadn't, but this was like a different switch that happened within me. And I think, I always like when I talk with aunts or uncles about it, sometimes or friends, I say, I imagine or I wonder if this is kind of like the adrenaline that parents experience when they first have a child, when they feel this like, I'm going to protect this being no matter what, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. I think I maybe got a glimpse of that in these moments. I think because it was kind of like I'm going to do whatever it takes no matter what, and that's how I did it. That's how I acted accordingly. No matter what came, like no matter what block presented itself, I was like pushing through it no matter what. There was no option B. Like I was going to make things happen. And so by the time it was November, I started to feel the weight and the depth of this stuff. And, I was having a conversation with my best friend and I was explaining to her, or I was talking to her, and she was like, well, how are you? And those kind of moments where it's kind of like, how are you? And I'm like, well, like I stopped learning, I stopped knowing how to answer that question. So I just kind of like started crying. Honestly, on the phone call, I started crying and I started talking to her, and I allowed myself to go there. I think like when you're going through really hard times, sometimes like you don't even want to vocalize it because experiencing it is enough. Like when times are so tough, you kind of are just trying to maybe save all of the energy that you can or protect yourself in any way that you can. And so saying the words, speaking the things, it's like making them true. And sometimes you're trying to prevent that to protect yourself. So I feel like with her, it was like the first time I allowed myself to just express that I was going through it. Like I'm drowning. I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I'm going through it. I feel really anxious. And, I just kind of allowed myself to really express what I was going through. And if you've ever been like a caregiver, or again, I imagine as a parent, you don't really get to, it's kind of like, I don't know, I got into protector mode. So I wasn't leaning obviously like on my sister, or I tried not to. Maybe I did sometimes. Sometimes I think I showed emotion more than sometimes she allowed herself to. And I felt bad for that and all of that. But it's kind of like you don't want to become a burden to the people that you're trying to help, right? So I did that. And so this was the first kind of outburst. And so, anywho, my friend, she was like, you know what? Like, I know that you're trying to get through this all by yourself, but I really feel like you could benefit from support. Like, you need some help. And I actually really appreciate that from her, because not only does she suggest help, but she also paid for a healing session for me. So back then, only what, 3 years ago, let's say 2.5 years ago, I was I was learning about like I was already awakening and healing at that point, in the sense of other stuff, right? Like I I I did feel like I was going down rabbit holes of like the universe and your energy and your vibe and meditation and that kind of stuff, breath work. But I was still very new to like energy work. So like Reiki and somatic work, it was still foreign to me. Which is crazy to say because like nowadays this is something that's becoming a part of my day to day. But back then it was foreign to me. So I remember being so nervous for this session, not really knowing what to expect, but being excited, I think, to receive help of some sort and hopefully to feel better. Um, and so I had my session and we were kind of talking through some of the things. And in the session, I expressed at some point, whew, I don't, I'm going to allow myself to get emotional in these episodes. So just give me 1 second. And it's funny or not. In the session, the healer, she mentioned you giggle when you giggle to suppress emotion, right? And I was like, ooh, or like, why do you smile when you're saying something sad? She said. And, I love when people call me out in those ways because it helps me learn about myself. And I think as first gens, we can be really good chameleons, camaleones. I don't know how to say chameleon. I hope I'm saying it right. But I think that we learn how to mask a lot, right? Emotions, feelings, like we other stuff, like we mask a lot. So I love kind of when people can see through that, and can call me out. So she called that out. But so in the session, I told her about my sister, obviously, and kind of what we were experiencing. I remember her telling me, like, you're really young to be going through something like this. And um, throughout my sister's treatment, that's something that we heard often because she was young. She was 25, and so I was 28. And I was like one of the caregivers out there. It was just her boyfriend, and I. So I was part two of the caregiver, right? And so she was like kind of calling it out. It is something really big that you're going through, and you are really young to be going through this. And her recognition of that made me feel validated, I guess, in the sense that I was able to trust her. And so I basically said, I feel like I'm dying. And I'm so thankful that it came out with someone that was intuitive, perhaps, or that was wise enough to answer the way that she did. Because number one, she allowed for some silence. And what that silence did was it helped me hear myself. And I'm going to talk a little bit slower just because I do feel like the emotion bubbling up, but it allowed me to hear the words that I was saying. And I was like, whoa, I did not know that I felt that way. And what I meant when I said that, because, then she paused. And so I explained to her a little bit more. It was actually, I think she helped me see basically that because I can be really empathetic, and because I put myself in other people's shoes, she basically told me, what you are trying to do, or it seems like you're trying to be your sister. Like, you're so, like, there's so much powerlessness that you're experiencing as her sister, that instead you're trying to be her. And when she said that, it was like it rang true in my whole body, because I didn't recognize how much I wish, well, one, I wish it was me in her shoes. And I vocalized that to her, is like, yeah, I wish I could be going through this. Obviously, I don't wish I could be going through it, but I wish if it was between her and I, that it would be me, right? And two, like, she helped me see, she said, like, the most important thing that will stay with me forever, she said, your sister doesn't need you to be her. Your sister needs you to be her sister. Whew. When she said that, it helped me see this from such a different perspective. I was trying to embody her experience to the point where I felt like I was gonna pass away in some way. I don't know, and I think in some way I was, but not in a physical way, more like a spiritual way. Like, the version of me, of Priscilla, was definitely shifting in those moments, and I was going through a death and a rebirth, but not in the way that I was feeling it physically. So I know, I'm in between emotion and trying to portray the message that I want to get across, but I think that first gen guilt or guilt can be something that drives our actions or inactions. And I think that as first gens, we experience guilt so much. And typically it's around our family members. In some way, it's tied to family. And this story, I wanted to share it with you guys because I think sometimes sometimes the guilt we're experiencing is a form of trying to control someone else's experience. Like, when we feel guilt about getting to travel and maybe our family members not getting to travel or getting to work a job that's not labor intensive, like it's not laborious, I guess. And it's maybe at an office. I think like we're actually, with what guilt is telling us is that we're trying to, or we wish we had control over another person's experience. And similarly, I think like when people guilt trip us, they're trying to in some way impact our actions or the way that we feel about something. And so in their own way, the guilt trip is the means to control our lives or experience of life. I hope that makes sense. But when I thought about the story, I had actually thought about sharing it with you guys in a different way. But when I thought about it, I was like, wow, this is actually maybe a very extreme or strong example of guilt and how it can play out and how strong it can be that you try to literally, and obviously this is also an example of empathy, right? But to the point that you're trying to embody or trying to control someone else's experience, like it's kind of like, in my perspective, you shouldn't be experiencing this, or you should be experiencing this, like one or the other. So maybe like you should be able to travel like me, or you should be able to have a job like I did, or make the money that I did, or you shouldn't have experienced this or that, right? So like the guilt is informing us that we had a different perspective or vision for what is happening, and we're feeling guilty that we can't do anything about it, or we're being driven to think that we should have control over it, so let's take some action. I think like this was an example that kind of went hand in hand with that, because it showed me that partially I was thinking, in my experience, you don't deserve that experience. I wish you weren't experiencing that. So through guilt, the guilty feeling, it's making me want to feel the things you're feeling because I feel powerless. And maybe this is the only way that I feel like I can do something, which is like, let me feel all the things that I think you're feeling. But like anything, I think that's an illusion, right? Like control and power over someone else's experience or life, what they should or shouldn't be living, that's an illusion. And it I really liked the way that she said it, like, you don't need to be her, you need to be her sister. And so maybe that could be an example for you guys of like, you don't need to be your parent's parent. You need to be your parent's child. You don't need to be your sibling's parent. You need to be your sibling's sibling. I think that was the lesson that I took away from it. It's like, I don't have to live her experience nor control it, because I actually have no control over it. What I have to do is control myself and control the version of me that's showing up to our relationship. Like what triggered this whole episode, where I said like, wow, like maybe guilt can be a sign of love, right? So I think like that's what triggered like this memory and me wanting to talk about this story with you guys, because I realized like that was my version of that. That was my version of feeling so guilty out of love that I wanted to in some way control that for her. So I hope that this example helps your journey in some way or another, or that it was just interesting for you to hear. And yeah, maybe reflect on like, how is guilt impacting your life, if at all? And what is that guilt trying to tell you? Is it trying to tell you something? Does it hold information that you're not aware of? Because sometimes we hold on to this guilt for so long that it like creates like, it's something that we carry with us and we just get used to it. But can we transform it? Can we turn it into something? Can we vocalize it? I think that's something worth thinking about and yeah, like reflecting on. Um, So let me know. I think my priority is for you guys to comment like how long you've been hearing and tuning in for, and what's your favorite part about the podcast so far. But if you also want to include in there, if this was helpful to you, or if it brought up any reflections for you, I would love to know. And I wanted to also mention to you guys that I do have sessions. So I called this episode Corazon a Corazon. That's kind of like the name of the series, let's say, right? But Corazon a Corazon is actually the name of my intuitive sessions. So how I see my sessions, it's like you're talking to a prima. That's why I call myself the intuitive prima, someone that is going through a healing and awakening journey just like you. I just happen to have decided to dedicate like my life, let's say, or not my life, that sounds so dramatic, but like my day-to-day to these journeys and to talk to fellow first gens, Latinas, Latinos, Latines on healing and awakening journeys. So maybe someone that can provide intuitive guidance and support. And honestly, I also provide loving regaños, as I like to call them, because I know that sometimes we need that like encouraging and empowering push to step into the next phase of our journey. So my sessions are called Corazon a Corazones. They're 1 hour video long or video 1 hour long video sessions. And I have them linked in every episode at the bottom in the description. So if ever you feel like you need some support, you need to talk to someone that gets it, that's also been on the journey, make sure that you check that out and that you schedule one if you would like. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much, so much for tuning into the podcast. I really appreciate you. And I love you. I love me. And I can't wait until you love yourself. Okay? Okay, pues. Bye.